It's me again, Nathan Bailey, Edwin Washington Project volunteer. I'm going to enact part of a task Round Hill Colored School students would do twice a day to have fresh water. That white fence encloses the area where the school used to sit, and that's where we start. The school burned down October 31st, 1943, but this insurance photo was taken in October 1940. Cody Farm Drive and the community of homes it leads to didn't exist when the school was still standing. Paul Jackson attended Round Hill Colored School between 1934 and 1942. Join me for the trip from the school to the Mars or Mart's home, carrying an empty pail. We start the trip going south on Woodgrove Road toward the city of Round Hill, Virginia. The school had permission to fetch water from the porch of a home a quarter-mile away. Remember, the Round Hill Colored School had no plumbing. This arrangement permitted the students to have fresh water for drinking and cooking. It's not known if LCPS paid for this privilege or if it was an act of kindness. I like to think it was an act of kindness. Judging from their architecture, I'd say none of these homes along this part of the road were here before Round Hill Colored School burned down. You'll see what I mean after we get to our destination. Some of the homes that are here now appear to have been constructed as early as the 1950s or 1960s. Others are newer. Paul Jackson describes the area as mostly farmland this far from the city. When Paul Jackson attended the school, this road was paved. It would have been a main artery for the farms in the area to the city of Round Hill. Still, it probably didn't see the volume of traffic that we'll see today. The water was not only for drinking. It was used for cooking the soup the school would sometimes prepare for the students' lunch. LCPS would deliver soup and dried beans to the school. The beans would be soaked in water overnight. The following day they would be added to the soup that was cooked on the school's pot-belly stove. This part of the trip is slightly downhill. With this being mostly farmland back then, the number of homes along this route were likely few, not like what we see today. Imagine this was just farmland, fields, and woods. Some of the pastures had cattle grazing. The sign there on the west side of Wood Grove welcomes you to the city of Round Hill. Here, Wood Grove Road becomes Main Street. Our downward trek brings us to a small stream. It's not hard to imagine students stopping on their way to toss stones into the stream. We're at the intersection of what is now Greenwood Drive and Main Street in Round Hill, Virginia. Main Street becomes Wood Grove Road as it leaves the city of Round Hill. After we cross the stream, we begin a slight climb as the road rises beneath our feet. We're nearing our destination. Of course, this style of trash bin would not have been along the road. Perhaps trash would have been in metal cans with lids. Perhaps residents were responsible for the removal of their trash. We've reached our destination, covering the quarter of a mile from the school to the former Mars or Mart's home in Round Hill, Virginia. You can see this is an older home by its architecture. It's 2:14 p.m. The trip took about 9 minutes walking at a leisurely pace. I'm sure that a young man could have covered the distance quicker. Here, the pail would be filled with fresh water from a pump on the home's porch. Join me on the return trip to school carrying a pail of water. Here's the Mars or Mart's home. It probably looked much like this when Paul Jackson attended Round Hill Colored School between 1934 and 1942. The school had permission to fetch fresh water from a pump on the porch of the home. Remember, the Round Hill Colored School had no plumbing. This arrangement permitted the students to have fresh water for drinking and cooking. It's not known if LCPS paid the Mars and Mart's family for this privilege, or if it was an act of kindness. I like to think it was an act of kindness. Here I simulate pumping water into the pail. I've weighed this pail with water. 20 pounds. And now we head off back north on Main Street, Route 719, also known as Woodgrove Road, towards Round Hill Colored School. We start the return trip walking downhill toward the small stream. We try to avoid sloshing the water out of the pail. While this task is done twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening, the amount of water we bring back has to serve 7 grades of as many as 36 students for drinking, and may also be used for cooking on the school's potbelly stove. When Paul Jackson attended the school, this road was paved. It would have been a main artery from the farms in the area to the city of Round Hill. Still, it probably didn't see the volume of traffic that we'll see today. It's a quarter mile back to the school from the Mars or Mart's home. At the bottom of a hill, we reach a small stream. Maybe the student set the pail of water down and tossed a stone or two into the stream. Maybe not. Now we begin an uphill walk away from the stream. Remember, most of this land was farmland. Perhaps cattle stopped their grazing to come over and watch the student carry the pail. Wearing a tie was a bad choice for today's enactment. This uphill walk could have been a formidable task during the winter. If the student was walking into a stiff north wind trying not to slosh water, one can imagine the student thinking of the hot soup that was sometimes prepared for their lunch on the school's pot-belly stove. The student might have imagined holding a bowl or can of hot soup while the cold north wind blew outside the schoolhouse. LCPS would have delivered soup and dried beans to the school. The beans would have soaked in water the night before, and today they'd be added to the soup as it cooked. I've been shifting the pail of water from one hand to the other to give my arms and shoulders a rest. Still, the pail has gotten heavy enough for me to set it down and take a brief break. Surprising how heavy 20 pounds can feel after a few minutes. I'm not as young as the students who had this task, and maybe they wouldn't need to take a break. Maybe they even made it a game to see how far they could carry the pail of water without taking a break. Maybe they tried to stretch the time to fetch the water out as long as they could to delay getting back to the classroom. Students might have had to step off the road for a passing tractor or large wagons carrying hay. I continue to shift the pail of water from arm to arm. Here, a kindly motorist stops to offer me a lift. I explain what I'm doing and tell her we don't have much farther to go. Her dog's name is Ida Jane. I thank her for her consideration, and she drives off. I know from my interview with Paul Jackson that on occasion a neighboring farmer would give him a ride home from school. It's possible that in the past a motorist might have seen a student walking with a pail of water and offered them a ride. And it's possible that in the past a student, recognizing the motorist, would gratefully accept the ride. We've crested the hill now. The student would be able to see the school up ahead on the right. It may have been a lone structure sitting amidst the fields and pastures as it appears in this photo from October 1940. The school burned down October 31st, 1943. The school building itself sat right next to the road. We've reached our destination, the location of the former Round Hill Colored School at Woodgrove Road or Main Street and Cody Farm Drive. Here, the pail of water would be used for drinking and cooking. Total time for the trip carrying a 20-pound pail of water from the Mars or Mart's home to Round Hill Colored School, 10 minutes. A round trip, including the time it took to fill the pail, let's say 30 minutes.